Doctor Who had just about won a reprieve from an undignified cancellation in 1986, but the fallout from BBC controller Michael Grade's demand that the lead actor be replaced and the abrupt and acrimonious departure of script editor Eric Saward left producer John Nathan Turner to desperately steady the ship ahead of the 1987 season. With the freight train of production already in motion, the appointment of the young Andrew Cartmel to replace Saward came a little late for the newcomer to truly stamp his vision for the future of the show on the resultant season 24. What Cartmel lacked in experience, he certainly made up for with enthusiasm, a fervent desire to take the reins of the show in both hands and steer it in a direction more suited to the contemporary pop culture landscape with which he was perhaps more familiar than his predecessor or even the veteran producer. Key to realising Cartmel's ambitions for the show, and to make plain that it was to depart from the light entertainment shallowness that many viewers perceived of it having become, was to solve the problem of the audience surrogate. Having inherited the companion Mel from the previous era, Cartmel realised that such a bubbly character who screams at the drop of a hat would not fit with what he envisioned as a darker, grittier interpretation of the show. For that, Cartmel perceived that a stronger, more complex companion would be needed, one who wasn't afraid of her own shadow, but nevertheless, someone who would be fallible. Indeed, someone who was damaged by her past, someone who would go on a journey with the Doctor, not only physically, but emotionally. With this intention, Cartmel set in motion the genesis of a character that has become known as the first truly modern Doctor Who companion.
Can I stop? Thank you.
Cartmel's hopes for a change in companion were bolstered by Bonnie Langford's desire to move on from what she herself called Little Miss Sweetie Pie. Despite John Nathan Turner's efforts to secure an option on a further 8 episodes with Mel for the next season, Langford could only commit to appearing in the debut, where she expected to be written out. Nathan Turner, wanting to begin the next season, the 25th anniversary year, fresh and unburdened by the need to write out and introduce a new companion, instructed Cartmel to identify potential companion characters in 2 respective season 24 stories that were then being scripted. At that stage it was unclear which would be transmitted last, but it was likely that whichever did would see their candidate step aboard the TARDIS. Namely, these 2 hopefuls were Ray, a tomboyish motorcycle mechanic from the 1950 set Delta and the Bannerman, and a similarly streetwise teenage girl from contemporary London, at that point named Alf, who had found herself swept away through time and space to a distant ice planet in Dragonfire. Despite Ray of the Welsh Valleys having, in Nathan Turner's words, a certain charm, it became clear once writer of Dragonfire Ian Briggs developed the character of Alf for what would be the finale of season 24, renaming her Ace in the process, that the 80s bother-booted teenage tearaway was the stronger character, more aligned with Cartmel's vision for the programme going forward. Nathan Turner promptly instructed Cartmel to rewrite the ending of Dragonfire to have Mel now depart with space rogue Glitz at the end of Dragonfire, instead of Ace as was originally written. The actress who had won the chance to fill those aforementioned bother boots was 25-year-old London-born Sophie Aldred. After graduating from the drama department at the University of Manchester in 1983, she had begun to carve out a career in children's theatre, along with singing in working men's clubs. It was during her appearance as part of the chorus in one of the many thousands of Topol's performances of Fiddler on the Roof that Aldred's agent contacted her with the offer of an audition for 3 episodes of Doctor Who. The production team were looking for an actress who could ride a bike, and her agent's note on the back of her publicity photograph, "Has own leathers," had intrigued them. The actress duly travelled down to London to audition for director Chris Clough and was handed a page of monologue with the name Ray heading it. Although Sarah Griffiths eventually won the part of Ray, despite not being as au fait with a motorbike, the monologue that Aldred had read was actually that of Ace's, taken from Briggs's Dragonfire, and after a recall to audition for John Nathan Turner himself, Aldred's agent happily informed her that she had not only won the part, but could potentially become the new companion as well. Aldred was ecstatic at landing her first television gig, and was immediately congratulated by none other than John Scott Martin, who was appearing alongside her on stage that night. The veteran Dalek operator passed her a postcard welcoming her to the family, having known from the moment she'd gone for the audition that she had a bright future ahead of her in time and space. Unlike her immediate predecessors, Aldred was afforded the opportunity to have a lot of say in her costume. Attending the first rehearsal for Dragonfire at BBC North Acton, Cartmel complimented the actress on her casual ensemble of stripy t-shirt, black shorts and Doc Martens, suggesting that such a style would be good for the character she was about to inhabit. Taking further inspiration from a recent copy of music and fashion magazine The Face, Aldred and costume designer Richard Croft headed off to the King's Road, Chelsea, to select the various items that would comprise what would go on to become one of the most iconic costumes of the programme. The centrepiece was the black bomber jacket emblazoned with a mixture of badges and patches, many of which were Aldred's own, including the 2 genuine examples of the much-coveted Blue Peter badge, which the actress had won way back in 1970 for submitting ideas for the children's programme's famous makes, one for a working rocket launcher fashioned from a washing-up liquid bottle and a garden hose. It was with great trepidation that Aldred first stepped through the doors of Television Centre on the 28th of July 1987 for her first day of recording. Although she would soon go on to score a second television job presenting children's programme Corners, which would be transmitted before her Doctor Who debut, the inexperienced actor was somewhat daunted by the buzz of activity inside the labyrinthine studios. Used only to the ephemeral nature of theatrical performances, it was with some awe and awkwardness that Aldred gazed up at the monitors around the studio, all displaying a close-up of her face that would later be projected into millions of homes around the world. None of this anxiety is visible in her performance, however, unless it was channeled into Ace's indecisiveness over whether to accept the evil Kane's poisoned chalice to join his team of corrupted souls. Indeed, Aldred's first scene is a great example of how her companion's character differed from those of her immediate predecessors. Initially tempted by the seductive promise of seeing the universe, Ace displays a suicidal courage that renders any potential rescue by the Doctor unnecessary.
Right! Freeze! Don't freeze, stand still and let Mel go!
You stupid girl. You think it's that easy to walk away from me?
Do you feel like arguing with a can of deodorant that registers 9 on the Richter scale? Run!
With Cartmel and Nathan Turner's initial character proposal as his base, Briggs developed Ace into a tougher, more gung-ho personality than had been seen in the Doctor's companions for quite some time, perhaps since Leela, with her contemporary slang and adolescent angst drawn, believe it or not, from 3 real-life girls with whom Briggs had come into contact while working at Questa's Youth Theatre in Ealing. Alongside her signature exclamations of
Ace!
at the sight and sound of explosions, and her nicknaming of Mel as
Donut!
or Glitz as
Bilge bag!
it was decided that she would eschew the main character's chosen moniker in favour of the somewhat sarcastic
Professor.
Something that helps to drive home her irreverence of conventional formality. This does, however, emphasise when the stakes are truly raised, where she reverts to his true title.
Gordon Bennett, what a bunch of spots.
Her choice vocabulary has been questioned as to its authenticity ever since first transmission, but the real-life inspirations for Ace reportedly found her quite convincing. Her love of explosives was also allegedly inspired by one of these girls, who did indeed blow up her school's art room, although I sincerely doubt it was with homemade gelignite as in Ace's case. Unlike the underdeveloped origins of Mel, we quickly learn quite a lot about Ace's background, with the influence, or should that be outright plagiary, of the Wizard of Oz providing her real first name.
It's my name. It's not really Ace. My real name's Dorothy.
You're from Earth?
And inspiring how she ended up transported through time and space from the London suburb of Perivale to the far future of the planet Svartos.
I was doing this brilliant experiment to extract nitroglycerin from gelignite. I think something must have gone wrong. This time storm blows up from nowhere, whisks me up here.
And when was this?
Whilst the fate of Dorothy Gale's real parents is never made clear, Ace's belligerent denial of her own parents' existence
I haven't got no mum and dad. I've never had no mum and dad, and I don't want no mum and dad. It's just me, all right?
Sorry.
immediately hints at a domestic discord that had not really been explored up till now in Doctor Who, aside from the brief and underdeveloped nature of Peri's relationship with her stepfather in Planet of Fire.
You blew up the art room.
It was only a small explosion.
Ace's angry outburst to Mel's questions about her family firmly sets out early on that this dimension to the new companion's life would go on to further impact on her time with the Doctor, affording the writers the opportunity to develop a character arc for her so that she would not remain the same by the time she left the TARDIS.
Are Are you sure this is the right way?
The most explicit evidence for how this new companion would differ from her immediate predecessor can be found as part of the climax to episode 1 of Dragonfire, where her intimidated but silent reaction to the advance of the eponymous dragon is sharply juxtaposed with Mel's habitual screaming. This scene, if nothing else, clearly indicates that the time of inserting archetypal damsel-in-distress caricatures as companions was over. Like the aforementioned Leela, Ace is no shrinking violet, prepared to take up arms to defend herself and the Doctor. Unlike Leela, however, she has a vulnerability and naivete beyond her ignorance of the times and places to which she travels. Whereas Leela, with her warrior instincts, would always evaluate all environments and circumstances strategically, Ace's aggression and hard edges come more from improvisation and emotion. She can therefore be both a capable and independent companion whilst rushing into situations where angels fear to tread, finding herself overwhelmed by superior opposition. In her first story as de facto companion, Remembrance of the Daleks, an excursion to retrieve her very 80s boombox from a Dalek-infested Coal Hill school finds her face to face with one of the fearsome Scarosians. Literally backed into a corner and taking umbrage at the Dalek's description of her, she wields her trusty baseball bat, enhanced by the power of the Hand of Omega, to deal some critical hits.
Small human female sighted on level 3.
What are you calling small?
Under a There's an impaired.
It's a fantastic scene, again recalling the pluck and prowess of Leela when similarly cornered by seemingly unstoppable foes, and it has rightly gone down in history as one of the most legendary scenes not just for a companion, but for the entire show. It's important to remember, though, that despite Ace's determinedness and capability when the stakes are raised, the very fact that her stubbornness and naivete have led her into such situations means that the Doctor is not usurped as the primary hero. While she might not always need rescuing, his guidance and education of her in the ways of his topsy-turvy life become integral to her survival.
That tape deck was a dangerous anachronism. If someone had found it and discovered the principles of its function, the whole microchip revolution would take place now, 20 years too early. With incalculable damage to the timeline.
This relationship, both didactic and at times paternal, becomes a key motif of Ace's time in the TARDIS. They clearly become very close, and we see them enjoying each other's company in scenes where the burgeoning friendship between Aldred and McCoy in real life informs their chemistry.
Oh, I do love a jam session.
Her rebellious and single-minded nature also provides plenty of times where her antics cause the Doctor exasperation.
Tell me now!
I haven't got the time!
Right, I'll stay here if that's what you want.
Beyond this, however, and with the development of the Seventh Doctor's scheming and manipulative personality in Season 26, the stories begin to place Ace at the centre of the narrative, the TARDIS team's fight against their various foes also having a personal dimension, forcing Ace to confront her demons and become tempered into a strong young woman.
This isn't a haunted house, is it, Professor? I told you I've got this thing about haunted houses.
Did you tell me that?
Yes.
How many have you been in?
One was enough.
Thus, the classic series ends with a trilogy of Ace-centred stories. Mark Platt's Ghostlight, where we learn that the Victorian house to which the Doctor brings Ace is destined to later be destroyed by her younger self, enraged by a racist attack on a school friend, and recognising that same irrational hatred infesting its bricks and mortar.
When I lived in Perivale, me and my best mate, we dossed around together. We'd outdare each other on things. Skiving off. Stupid things. Then they burnt out Manesh's flat. White kids firebombed it. I didn't care anymore.
I think you cared a lot, Ace.
Ian Briggs's The Curse of Fenric, where Ace is confronted by the realisation that she has been a pawn all along in a game played by the evil entity Fenric, used to trap the Doctor.
You think I didn't know? The chess set in Lady Painful's study? I knew.
Earlier than that, Time Lord. Before Cyberman. Ever since Iceworld, where you first met the girl.
And where she is forced to reconcile her spite and hatred of her mother after unwittingly meeting her as an innocent baby.
What's wrong with me? Why can't I stop hating her?
You love the baby.
I didn't know she was my mum!
Love and hate. Frightening feeling. Especially when you're trapped, struggling beneath the surface. Don't be frightened of the water.
I'll always love you. I'll always love you. I'll always love you. Hello, darling. I'll always love you.
I'm not scared now.
And Rona Munro's survival, which returns her to the leafy suburb of Perivale, encountering her directionless friends who exist rather than live, as she has learned to do.
So where is everyone?
Who?
Jay?
Dunno, moved over west someplace. Think he's doing window cleaning, that's what I heard.
This last story, the finale of the classic era, is arguably the one in which she explicitly undergoes the most change, where her experiences with Kara the cheetah person and her communion with the alien planet see her transform, unlocking her savage animalistic side in the folkloric tradition of women escaping their staid and caged lives to become cats or other such unrestricted creatures.
Come hunting, sister!
Wait!
Thematically, therefore, Ace has to face her deeper nature, one that yearns to be free of the strictures of the mundane society from which she hails, to take control of her life after being used either for good or ill by powerful male figures like Fenric or even the Doctor. After her assurance to the Doctor in The Curse of Fenric that she is
Not a little girl.
when she makes use of innuendo and her sexuality as a means to distract a guard,
It's a wind whipping up. I can feel it through my clothes.
Survival finds her exploring, albeit subtly, a possible bisexuality in her developing relationship with Kara.
I'm your sister.
No, you're not. Why do you keep calling me that?
You're like me.
Yeah?
You will be.
This is good. I like feeling like this.
Perhaps rendered too subtle by the cheetah people costume impeding the conveyance of the two women's affections, the folkloric themes of sexual awakening in stories of female transformation, especially if sexuality considered unnatural by the status quo, is clear for those who wish to read it.
Good hunting, sister.
By the end of the story, and therefore the end of the series, convinced that the Doctor is dead, Ace dons his iconic hat and, for a moment, it's like she is about to take on his mantle, grieving his loss, but suitably prepared by his tutelage and her personal experiences to take on the role of Time's champion.
Mine, I believe. Thank you.
Of course, he's not really gone, but as the two walk off to face further adventures, it becomes clear, looking back now after almost 2 decades of the Revive series, that Ace, more than any other classic companion, is a template of what was to come.
I felt like I could run forever. Like I could smell the wind and feel the grass under my feet and just run forever.
Her independence, her contemporary domestic backstory, her grit, combined with her growth from a tough but naive girl to a savvy and committed hero who chooses to stand by the Doctor even though she could well go it alone, was a new mould from which future companions like Rose and Martha could be cast.
Home.
Home?
The TARDIS.
Yes, the TARDIS. There are worlds out there where the sky's burning, where the sea's asleep and the rivers dream. People made of smoke and cities made of song. Some of there's danger, some of there's injustice, and somewhere else the tea's getting cold. Come on, Ace. We've got work to do.
It was originally planned that Ace would depart midway through the proposed season 27, with Mark Platt's Ice Time revealing that the Doctor's ulterior motive for his coaching of Ace was to prepare her for enrollment in the Time Lord Academy, and thus fully become a time-travelling hero in her own right. Despite the reservations some fans may have about this proposed fate for Ace, it again neatly presages the growth of future companions to become Doctor-like, independently righting wrongs. With the abrupt end to the television programme in 1989, however, these plans never came to fruition, and the long wilderness years period saw the post-survival narrative split into several divergent threads. Despite a brief cameo of Ace in 1993's charity special Dimensions in Time, where the status quo was firmly maintained,
When was the last time you had that junk heap in for an MOT, Professor?
any further development of her character was left to the authors of Virgin's New Adventures novel series. As was typical with that series, the books emphasised Ace's angst and conflict with the Doctor, whose Machiavellian manipulations become even more callous in his fight against the evils of the universe. After he manipulates her lover Jan into sacrificing himself in order to defeat the fungoid Hootie in Paul Cornell's Love and War, she acrimoniously departs the TARDIS, her love for the Doctor transformed to bitter hatred. She returned only 2 books later, however, 3 years older and hardened into a lethal combat veteran after fighting the Daleks as a member of Space Fleet in the 26th century. In a development rather typical of the time, Ace was now clad in a skin-tight combat catsuit rather than her tomboyish television garb, and the artists of the range took full advantage of this new look to sell copies to the target audience of young men. Eventually departing the TARDIS for a final time, she becomes a time-travelling vigilante, patrolling the timelines from her base in the Paris of 1887. With the Virgin New Adventures novel series intended as a continuation of the story, the Doctor Who magazine comic strip initially followed suit, including both Ace and new companion Benny Summerfield from those books. Eventually, however, the writers of each respective series took the story and characters in new directions, with Ace's comic counterpart dying, ironically, as the result of a Nitro 9 explosion as she helps to defeat the hateful Lowbury. With the debut of Big Finish's audio adventures in 1999, Ace's adventures immediately post-survival were again revisited, this time developing her less drastically, aside from a brief spell where, traumatised by her experiences at Castle Colditch during the Second World War, she becomes disillusioned by her peripatetic life of righting universal wrongs, and rejects her nickname in favour of the surname finally given to her in the New Adventures, McShane.
Sorry, Ace, do you want sugar?
What? What did you just call me?
What?
You called me Ace. I don't call myself that anymore, and I didn't tell you that I ever did.
You must have done.
No, I haven't mentioned it on purpose, because it's in the past. Who are you? What do you want? One night off, that's all I wanted! Get away from me!
Wait, just a minute, please!
Soon after, however, she departs with the Doctor once again, the status quo restored. Over the decades that have followed, her Big Finish adventures have seen her fall in love, join the Time Lord's Celestial Intervention Agency, and fight in the Time War, before having her timeline and memories repeatedly altered and overwritten. It was in the Doctor Who spin-off The Sarah Jane Adventures where fans would be provided with yet another possible fate for Ace, in a throwaway mention of her heading an organisation cheekily named a Charitable Earth.
Oh, there's a Dorothy something. She runs that company, a Charitable Earth. She's raised billions.
Russell T Davies has since confirmed that he had hoped to include her character in person in a later episode, but the untimely death of Sarah Jane actress Elizabeth Sladen rendered this unrealised. This suggested reality for Ace was, however, further expanded in the trailer for the Season 26 Collection Blu-ray.
It's been 30 years.
And Aldred's own novel, At Childhood's End, which offers not only a resolution to her original time with her Doctor, alongside her meeting the 13th Doctor, but also provides some explanation for her multifarious post-survival lives through the inclusion of the Quantum Anvil, a temporal possibility engine that fractures her timeline. The canonicity of even this, however, is open to interpretation, as Ace was once again to encounter the 13th Doctor when she triumphantly returned to the television programme proper in 2022's The Power of the Doctor.
Ace? That is a good look on you, Professor.
Despite this rather overstuffed finale to the 13th Doctor's era, Ace still gets plenty of opportunity to shine, once again donning her iconic bomber jacket and wielding her baseball bat in a fight against the Daleks, and sharing a touching scene with an AI hologram of her Doctor, where any former acrimony or conflict is settled once and for all.
I was only ever trying to teach you good habits, Ace. Obviously I failed.
You never failed me, Professor. You made me the person I am today. I'm sorry we fell out. I'm sorry I judged you. I didn't understand the burden you carried.
All children leave home sooner or later. The joy is to watch them fly.
So, We're good.
Oh, we're more than good. We're ace.
As she takes her seat at the end of a story that celebrates the long history of the programme, it is perhaps she, more than any of the other fan-pleasing cameos, that is the most significant member of the companion support group. That young girl from Perivale, angst-ridden and impetuous, now tempered into a stoic and stable woman by her travels in time and space with the Doctor, an explicit bridge from the classic series to the new, the first truly modern companion.